Welcome back to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I have seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and I'm experiencing these episodes for the first time.
And today we are reviewing Season 1, Episode 8, Anonymous. Director is Danny Cannon. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker and Eli Talbert. Original air date of November 24th, 2000. And I'm gonna be curious to hear your scale, because our intro is just full Vegas Strip.
Yeah, so I gotta tell you, there's a bit of challenge in this one.
Okay.
So, the general gist of the scale is how long the intro is, but also how many different Vegas scenes they show, right?
Okay.
And like a lot of times they'll like be showing the strip, they'll cut to another angle. They did this weird like zoom in and enhance thing, where they just kept like jumping in to like a deeper part of the same frame.
Yes.
I think they're trying to sort of like be like, he's in this hotel, so we're gonna like, like we're bringing you into the scene or something. And so I kind of made a judgment call, and I counted that as like several cuts. It's just like two scenes instead of just one, which is probably a pretty important for the overall calculation. But I think the final result is accurate. This is a 3 out of 5. It's kind of in the middle. That's what we should think about a 5. It's like, I think I also think that this is where I think the appropriate amount of Vegas is. It was 15 seconds.
Okay.
Anything more than 15 seconds, we're getting a little long here.
Yeah, getting a little long. Yep.
And it was basically 2-ish scenes. We saw the strip, and then we sort of like panned somewhere else, and then we were in the hotel room. And so.
Yeah. So we move on over to the hotel room where a man is pouring a drink for himself. I put downtrodden. That's how I described this gentleman, is that he looked downtrodden. And he walks into the bathroom. He wipes the mirror. It has condensation on it. He wipes the mirror down, and then we hear a door open, or that's what I assume we hear, is we hear a door open, and he reacts to it.
Yeah, he like turns his head like he wasn't expecting someone. Yeah, he looked very defeated, right? Like he didn't have a good day, lost all his money.
Well, no, we come to find out later that the only reason he's in the hotel room is because his house is getting fumigated, so maybe he's like really bummed about his house being fumigated. Yeah. We then go to Grissom in the hotel hallway, and Jim Brass tells him that he's gonna love this. He goes into the hotel room, he meets Jim Brass. Jim Brass tells him he's gonna love it, and they realize that it is Royce Harmon, our victim from episode 1, all over again.
Yeah, as soon as we had like a guy in a tub, I was like, oh, is this the guy from episode 1 again? It's a little on the nose.
For those who have been listening to all of our episodes, in the last episode, one of Nick's predictions was that the killer was the killer from episode 1 that they have yet to catch, which turned out not to be true, but I had to bite my tongue and not tell Nick that the very next episode he gets introduced back.
Yes.
I was like, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let Nick come to discover this one on his own.
Yeah. That turns out not to be the only thing you were sleeping on, not telling me about.
There's quite a few things which I will get to, because I want to admit something where I totally misremembered the order of these episodes. So
cool.
They find the tape recorder and they play it. Jim Brass is like, is that Swedish? It's obviously somebody talking backwards. So they play the recording. It's somebody talking backwards, and then Grissom needs a few moments alone in the scene, and then he has this very dramatic, I had to take note of this, he looks into the mirror that the guy had just wiped and was like, "You're back."
Or you, did he say you're back, or you again, or whatever? Yeah.
He said, "You're back." At least that's what I wrote down.
I don't think the first time I saw it, I understood what he meant. I think it was like self-aggrandizing. I don't know. I know at that point it was the guy from episode 1, so maybe that's what I thought.
Maybe.
I was like, they were just really laying it out there this time.
So we go to credits. We go to Nick and Warwick playing a video game.
And I have a product placement here.
Ooh, okay.
I couldn't quite decide. So they're playing this. First off, they're playing on a Dreamcast, which they mentioned. I think that was one of the OG, may have been the OG product placement.
I think it
reference.
Was in the first or second episode. They very purposely mentioned Dreamcast. Like, are you playing X game on Dreamcast?
Yeah, or I just felt really dated by it because Dreamcast it was a flash in the pan, so it felt old really quickly. But they're playing some kind of football game, and it reminds me of like like a Madden football game or like any of those 2K sports games from that era. And I was like, but they didn't say the name of the sport. They don't actually say the name of the console. But he's very much holding that control. It's very iconic controller of the Dreamcast. It has a little screen in the middle. And I was like, is that a continuation of the product placement before, or just like someone on set really just like playing Dreamcast football?
Yeah. Or they didn't, or they bought it for the other reference and then didn't want to spend the money on getting a different console. So they're like, Dreamcast it is. That's what they're going to be playing.
I have quite the comment later about how the show has saved some money. This is some money this episode.
Oh, okay.
That's what I actually messaged Lauren about this because I couldn't believe it.
Yes. It's amazing. Guys are gonna. I'm so glad that Nick is much better at paying attention to detail than I am, because I never would have caught this, and I've seen this series multiple times and I never would have caught this. So Grissom gives them a 410, a car over a cliff. There might be foul play involved. We pop on over to Grissom with Catherine and Sarah, and this is where we get the catch up on episode 1. Most likely for those, this is 2 parts. One, if someone missed the first episode and they have no idea about the Royce Harmon case, this is a nice brief, here's what happened with the Royce Harmon case. And then you also have to remember, guys, like, this premiered in 2000. This was before streaming services. So even if you did see that episode, you saw that episode 2.5 months ago, and you're probably not going to see that episode again until this series is in syndication and or gets released on DVD. So you have to remember that the watching experience is a little bit different than it is right now. So they do a quick little, the print came back to this prosthetic that this guy made, and then Sarah gets to go dust the crime scene with Red Creeper, which is Grissom's like special make. Which, is that legal? Like, are you allowed to use like non-standard print dust at scenes? I feel like that's not acceptable.
I wouldn't want to be the prosecuting attorney.
No.
Where evidence was relied upon the non-studied one-off special fingerprint tests of the rando CSI guy.
Red Creeper, my own concoction.
Wow.
Yeah, well, serious case, serious print powder. Be thorough. Don't take anything for granted.
Yes, sir.
I just want to comment on one thing. The other thing that used to happen is, like, this is episode 7, so 8. Or 8. I remember thinking, like, it used to be sometimes there's a lot of things to watch. You don't know what's going to be good. You see ads.
Right.
People start watching something, and you would just jump into it. And I didn't see the first 3 or 4 episodes.
Right.
And so if the audience has grown, they probably expect a lot of people that this is they missed the entire boat of that episode 1.
Yep.
And as you said, like, they're never going to see it. Something with that Red Creeper, though, I don't know what it is, but that's some product that I've seen before at the mall or something that they repurposed for this scene, and I couldn't place it, but I was like,
you're like, that
the
reminds me of
canister, the whole thing. I was having that. I just have these things where sometimes it like rings that little alarm bell in the back of your head, and I was like, the second watch through, I was like staring at it. I was like, no idea what it is.
I love it. So we move on to Nick and Warwick at the scene of the crash. There's nobody in the driver's seat of the vehicle. They do end up revealing somebody in the back seat, and Nick thinks that it is a DUI. There's a beer bottle, like, still cold nearby. So he thinks that the driver bailed and it was a DUI situation.
Yeah. They don't really cover it, but later they show there's like multiple more beer bottles in that car.
Yes.
And I was like, obviously he's like, it's cold, it's got foam. It's like, okay, well, somebody was drinking in that car.
Right.
But you could be drinking in the back seat. I mean, if you're willing to drink in the front seat, you're probably not gonna, the same kind of people.
Drinking in the back.
Yeah, the same kind of people drink in the back seat.
And we then go to Catherine and Grissom with the coroner. They notice a muzzle stamp on this victim, Stuart Rampler. I had to jot his name down.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Grissom confirms, which I feel like you would still need more evidence, but this is where Grissom decides that both deaths are homicides, both Royce Harmon and Stuart Rampler.
This is the scene where he's like, now we know. Yeah, he's like, oh, he's made his first mistake. Now he knows how to get the victim to the tub, and that
Yes.
they're both homicides.
Yes.
Or something. And I was
And I
like,
feel like we did not get enough data from the coroner for me to feel confident in that assumption. I was like, wow, Grissom is really just running with this.
this one feels a lot more like a homicide, right? It's very
Yes.
sketchy.
Because he had the bullet wound in his hand, which
Yeah.
would show
Defensive wounds.
Defensive wounds. Thank you. You know,
Took
like,
me a second.
why would you, if you were going to kill yourself, why would you
Yeah, it'd
shoot
all be
yourself
almost
through your
impossible.
hand to then through? You know, it doesn't make any sense. So we go to Nick and Warwick on the road. They realize that the car balanced before the fall.
Which I missed, and then I was like, how come they just assume this car is balancing on the edge in all their reenactments? And then I watched it, second watch there, I went, oh.
You're like, oh, that's why. That's why.
Oh,
Like, that
okay.
makes sense. That makes
Which
sense.
is actually important for one of like my notes later, where I really where I think I first nailed down. Well, I guess I don't actually accurately predict who wins the bet.
Okay.
Which we haven't covered yet, but
We have not covered yet. Nope.
But that a big part of it was like
Spoiler
wait-
alert. There's a bet in this episode.
yeah. If you haven't seen the episode, I apologize.
Yeah, go ahead and watch the episode.
I'm sure you're pausing this podcast, listening to it scene by scene. That'd be a fun way to watch the episode.
That could be. I'd be curious if anyone has watched it that way. Let us know. We're
Yeah.
happy
Eventually, we'll do a whole DVD box set director's commentary.
Yes.
Once we get through those series the first time, that's all.
Yeah, just let us
we'll go
get
back.
through all
300 and
16.
something.
Yeah, all 16 seasons, and I mean, again, the 16th season is like an episode, but it's fine. So we then see the reenactment from Nick's perspective of the Phantom driver. So the driver, getting out and basically leaving his buddy behind, and Warwick is coming back with the theory that there was a second car, that this was a crime, not an accident, and then this is where the bet comes into play, and Warwick says that he doesn't get out of bed for anything less than a bill.
A hundo or
Nick
something.
tried to do the
A bill,
$50, and he was like, I don't get out of bed for less than a bill. So $100 is where the bet begins.
I wrote gambling work again. So
Yep,
guess he's
I know,
back
he
on the
made it.
bandwagon.
He's back on the bandwagon.
They decided it wasn't like a big deal, and he's just gonna bet Free Willy again.
Yep.
I guess I don't know. You probably know whether this continues to be a problematic behavior for him or not.
You will find out.
But
We then go to Sarah at the hotel room. This is where they discover one of the bills that he was going to pay. The envelope has an upside down stamp on it. She then goes to print the bathroom, only to find out that there's not a single print. It's sterile, and the guy is a pro.
what a waste of red, whatever it's called.
Again, probably for the best, because
Maybe.
any attorney would have been like, we can't accept these fingerprints because
Or-
you captured them using some random concoction that you made.
Let me ask you this: if you were doing your job and your boss was like, "Don't use the thing that we're supposed to be using. Use this other product," and then it didn't work, wouldn't you be like, just out of curiosity, let me break out the real stuff?
Right, let me go back over this with actual printing dust and see what happens. Just in case. Maybe Grissom's special concoction, not that special.
Maybe that was the product placement for the episode. Maybe they were gonna sell
Oh,
one
the Red
additional
Creeper?
CSI Red Creeper that you could like dust your own fingerprints with.
Someone's going to send us an eBay listing for it.
It's
It's going
not
to be
like
great.
it looks like Manic Panic hair dye.
Oh gosh, Manic Panic. I have some of that in my house, actually. We pop on over to Grissom and Catherine with Mrs. Harmon. They let her know that they think that the person who killed her son has killed again. They also let her know that the second recording was confirmed to be the second victim. So
Allegedly.
his girlfriend confirmed that the recording is him. Mrs. Harmon still contests that the original recording was not her son, but she does present Grissom and Catherine with a talking picture frame so they could do a comparison.
She was, by the way, very adamant in that first episode.
That it was not her son.
That is not my son, right? And
Yeah.
like the whole opening of that case, beyond being anything but a suicide, is predicated on her making that claim.
Right.
They would never even. I mean, maybe they would have connected the two at this point because of the
Right.
other similarities, but like it never would have been on the big fish board.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, I assume that this is more to do with them being like, all right, we gotta do something with this other thing, and maybe we backed ourselves into a corner and we want to change it up a little, or it's just different, right?
Yeah.
Because like also who is that voice actor from last time? we're not going to go out and pay that guy to be an actor in a
again, to
TV
do
show.
this again, yeah.
Right, so like we have to find a way to do like a switcheroo or something. Like it can't be the voice of the killer because we've already chosen who that person is. It doesn't sound anything like that, right?
Yeah.
Although I do have another note on this later where I was so confused when we
Okay.
get to the voice matching.
The voice matching thing? Okay, yeah, we'll get there pretty soon, actually. So, before then, we go to Nick and Warwick at the hospital. They find out that their victim is sedated. He won't wake up for 12 to 24 hours. They also realize that even though he has like tan lines, he has no watch, he has no ring, he has no cash. And this is the first raising of the bet, so now the bet moves from $100 to $200 as Nick and Warwick kind of debate their theories in this guy's hospital room.
It's good to see series regular Asif Mandi again.
Yes, Asif Mandi.
Series regular third episode.
Yep, I very purposely was like not going to say Spot the Guest Star because not Spot the Guest Star.
Yep.
I hope you guys appreciate the music I added to the last episode.
I haven't listened to it yet, so I typically listen to our episodes, but we released pretty close to the recording of this one.
Yes, I released it this morning, so
yeah.
Yeah,
So
we're releasing and recording in the same day because my schedule is crazy this week, and then
we're just
you
getting off
obviously
on
have the
vacation.
and then you have the pig roast on Saturday. So I figured that later in the week would probably be really difficult for you. So
one note I do have is that I had to write down who wouldn't have cash in their wallet. What a bizarre society we lived in 2001. I don't think I've had, unless I'm going to something very specific, I don't think I've had cash in my wallet for the majority of the last 10 years.
I agree. The only reason I have cash on my wallet right now is twofold. One, I took some out for my recent vacation. I was like, oh, it's always good to just have some cash on you when you're on vacation, like just in case. So I took some cash out for that.
Technically, this guy was traveling, so it may be one of the few times I would also have cash.
Yeah.
If I was going to Vegas, I probably would have got it at the an ATM in Vegas, and then I probably would have also lost it all at the roulette table. So I would probably be without cash.
Cash again. Yes.
Again,
yes.
but
and then I'm also getting a tattoo,
kind of
and I need to tip my tattoo artist. So I purposely got cash out so I can tip my tattoo artist. Tip your tattoo artist.
I got cash to play the lottery. Because you need cash to play the lottery still.
Really?
Well, I think you could pay with the debit card now, but like I'm just so used to it. But I think we're like $900 million and like $700 million. I typically don't give the lottery a second look until it's over $500 million.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Once the payout is like mathematically greater than the odds, then I'm interested.
Then you're interested. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So we go to Sarah in the lab. Sanders is letting her know that he needs a comparison for the DNA, which I think we're led to assume is from the stamps, like the licking of the stamps.
Yep.
So they did not get self-sticking stamps. They got licky stamps.
This is 2001. You still have to lick your stamps.
2000.
They do show her, right? She puts like the stamp inside like a petri dish with some water.
Yep.
And then she pipettes the tiniest amount of water into a vial, and then they put it into a machine that they're gonna. In the early days of DNA, apparently get enough information from that. Yes. I love that Sanders has...
Sanders, not Xander.
I said Sanders this time.
I know you did.
But I love that he's like, oh, I have this guy's DNA profile loaded up.
Oh, already. Ready to go.
So fast. And so I started thinking about it. I wrote down a note about the CSI effect. I said, this is what's so interesting about this, is that these are things that we can do. Like all the stuff they're showing us, it's not like magic. No. It's not science fiction. It just needs to happen quick for the TV show. And all I could think is like, could you imagine like if you were filming a movie or something, and they were like, oh, we have to get this MacGuffin over this river. John, you used to work in construction. Build me a bridge by the end of the day. Right. Like we can build bridges, people. We know how to do it.
Yep, we can do it. We have the technology.
If you've ever driven a car, you probably have a lot of experience with how slow and crazy it can be. But even greenfield construction, where nothing existed before, and you don't have to worry about traffic, it takes a long time to do these things. And I think that's like the best part of the CSI effect is like it's not magic. It's just time travel.
Yes, it's time travel. They're Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So they realize that the upside down stamp is an unknown DNA profile. It does not. All the other ones match the victim. The upside down one does not. So we then go to our other storyline with Nick and Warwick examining the car. Nick is super gluing the entire car and then reveals prints on the steering wheel, which, I mean, yes, good that there's prints on the steering wheel, but It's a rental car, which I think they've mentioned at this point, and obviously somebody drove
Yes.
the car. Somebody,
Oh,
we know
but-
it wasn't like, this is not Tesla. This is not auto-driving cars.
They drive it like a gopher, though. It's just like the 10 fingerprints are just like on this top of the
Yes.
steering wheel.
Isn't that how you drive? That's how I drive. And we then go to Catherine and Grissom in the hallway. And this is when Grissom is telling Catherine about Disco Placid, who does audio comparisons.
I really hope this is a series regular. Although I did make a note that, like, didn't they have a whole audio voice comparison thing they did in another episode already?
Yes. And they did
And I
not
was
go
like,
to
but
Disco
now-
Placid for it.
but now they have to go to,
It was in-house.
Now they have to go to Disco Placid.
Yep,
I
now they
think it
go
was
to
the
Disco
kidnapping episode. The
Yes.
lady on the phone.
Yep, the
booth.
fake.
Yeah, the
Yep.
fake kidnapping.
And then we go to Disco Placid's studio. He is smitten with Catherine. And again, Grissom is left there super confused, not understanding what life is.
Yep.
Like, doesn't get what's going on, even though it's blatantly obvious that the two of them are having a mutual, like, hey, how are you doing sort of thing. Grissom's just like, audio, right? Like, can't we talk about audio? And so they show the voice comparison on the screen. Disco Placid is comparing the I love yous from both pieces of the audio from Royce Harmon's.
Well, here's
from
the thing.
From the recorder and then from the frame, and then
That-
comparing them, and then they match.
So this is
Is
what's
this what confused
confusing.
you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they
Okay.
say that, oh, this is the, like, I'm Stuart Rampler or whatever. It's the I love you mom, right? And then there's the I love you mom
Yep.
from the voice card.
Yep.
But if you look at the screen, one of them says Royce Harmon and one of them says Stuart Rampler, and then they come together and they line up, and the guy goes like, it's Memphis Twins, he says, or something, right? And I was like, this is so confusing because they're presenting it like it's the two audios, one from the card and one from the recorder, and that they're the same, and therefore it really was the guy's name. And the dialogue after also supports that. So I think they changed something
Maybe
in
they
the
changed
editing
something
here.
Maybe
right?
they did. Yeah. They
And
definitely make it sound like it's matching the audio from the recorder to the talking picture frame to prove that the recorder is Royce Harmon.
yeah, so I think they did a reshoot with the mom to just be like, oh, we got to get a different actor. We're
Yeah.
going to do this differently, and just how it changed their mind. But they had already spent the expensive Winamp level digital design budget on matching up these two voice audios,
So
and
they were like, we're keeping it.
they couldn't get rid of the one that says Royce Harmon on it. But if you go back and watch the episode, like the top line is like blue and it says Royce Harmon on it, and he matches up to the bottom line, which is yellow and says Stuart Stamper. And of course, the two colors meet again and turn into green, just like the other audio matchup they had done. So that made me think that Disco, whatever his name was,
Placid.
that was also part of the reshoot, and that maybe they had originally done this at the lab. And in
Oh,
order to
okay.
get they had to get new audio, so they just
Yeah,
threw
they
this
just-
other thing in there.
Alright,
Also,
I like
the whole
your
scene
theory.
has a little bit of like an airbrushing to it, which often happens with reshoots, just to like make it work.
So as they're reviewing the audio, they also isolate crinkling in the background. They then play the Royce Harmon and Stuart Rampler notes at the same time, and you realize that they're reading from a script. So they're saying, obviously there's differences because they're saying their different names, they're saying like the different year that they were born in, how old they were, but otherwise they're saying the exact same script. So that's when they realize that the crinkling in the background is probably the killer holding up the script to have them read from it. We
I like to
then
think this
go-
guy who's like an expert in like, well, this is spoiler alert. This guy who's an expert in prop making couldn't make anything more than just like a handwritten pencil on a piece of paper, like that's crumpled up, and then he held on to it for 3 months between killings because he didn't want to reproduce the same one, and that's why it's the exact same audio.
Exact same audio. Couldn't be bothered. We go to Nick and Warwick getting print results. They find out that there is a blue dust in the print. This comes back later, which is why I'm mentioning it here. We then go to Sarah, Grissom, and Catherine, I think in Grissom's office. They realize that the victims have the same birthday, different years, but same day. And Grissom thinks that what they've gathered so far as like the backwards, like the upside down stamp and then the backwards audio, is telling them that in order to go forward they have to go back.
Yeah.
So
It is holding the year, so it's like 1958, the first Royce Harmon was born in 1958. Stuart Rampler was born in 57.
Yeah.
So then Grissom sends her off looking for people in 1956, which was like, I guess I was sort of colored by, I think, the second watch through by like knowing the information. But like if you were expecting to find something older, then they should have gone the direction that they turns out they should have gone in, which is to go forward to 1959. And that we're moving back in years as we move forward in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead he tells her to go look for 1956, which
Yeah.
presumably she doesn't find anything.
Yeah. And then we
Although
get
I want to know when Grissom's birthday is, because if he was born in 1956, that would, on that date, he would have, it would have been too weird for him not to say, that's my birthday.
Yeah, that's also that seems like really convenient. That's also my birthday. We then get Stewart's, the print results back from his case, and there's 2 thumbprints overlapping. The bottom one comes back on the screen as clients, which we come to find out means that it is somebody internal. And it's Grissom's print. And somehow Grissom avoids any investigation. They just take his word that this is just a message from the killer letting him know that he has him under his thumb. No follow-up needed. We don't need to explain how his print got there. We just obviously Grissom couldn't have done anything wrong.
They do explain where the print came from later in the episode.
Yes, but that's still conjecture even when they get to it.
Yeah. I also like can't help but like at that moment he's like, "How did they get your print?" And I went, "Roller coasters." Because there's that one scene at the end of the movie. He's in the roller coaster all by his lonesome, crying for whatever reason, information I don't know yet, I guess. And I was like, his hands all over that roller coaster bar. He could just pay the dude at the roller coaster to go in after the guy who just lets one person in there by himself, unsupervised.
Right. Just wipe it down, let Grissom in, and then grab the print.
Yeah,
you never know.
Take a print. He probably used Red Creeper of his own. He's probably got Purple Creeper.
Purple. We then go to Nick and Warwick in the kitchen. The rental car, crazy enough, comes back with lots of prints, so that doesn't really help their case whatsoever. And they kind of, Warwick and Nick go back and forth. This is where they take it up to 300. Warwick is giving his robbery theory. We see a reenactment of this. And then they realize that they need to go research the footprints and the tire tracks to try to figure out their theories. We then go to Grissom at the warehouse, and we realize that it's been a couple of months. So I know that sometimes, Nick, you like to know like what the time frame.
Yeah.
So the last time you saw Paul Melander was a few months ago. So there's a time reference here that it's been a few months since the last time he saw Paul Melander, who is working on a piece called Good versus Evil.
It's great. And the rewatch, I was like, oh, this is some great direction, like directing, and just to have that, and like the way they show it, the way they shot it. Once you know and you rewatch it, it's so much better.
Yeah.
I will say that during the scene, I wrote down a prediction. I said, is the Halloween guy the real guy? Because he still would have had to stage the one fingerprint with like the oil and the stuff, right?
Right.
But I was like, it goes on, and we'll get into it, but it goes on, and he just has a cheekiness about him at times.
Yes.
And like I think the first thing he said that was weird, where he was like, "Oh, I don't remember your name." It's such like a power trip.
Yes.
If you've ever met that kind of person who is like that. And I was just like, oh, something is different about this interaction. And I still get hung up on this analogy to Moriarty. Like I feel like they're drawing from that Sherlock Holmes Professor Moriarty.
Yep.
Like I think as inspiration, Moriarty often has this interaction with Sherlock Holmes in depictions where he knows, and Sherlock Holmes doesn't know this is Moriarty, doesn't know who this person is yet, doesn't know that this is his foe. Right. And there's always this sort of like, sizing it up. And I was also like amazed by how much information Grissom gives away, because he's like, "Oh, how is that case going?" He's like, "Not good." So I'll let you get back to it. But I did have a prediction here that turned out to be right. I basically another prediction coming up that also turned out to be right. But both of these predictions, I would say I wrote them down, and I would give them low confidence when I wrote them down.
Yeah, so. Like you were like, maybe, but not feeling great about it. So they share a cup of coffee. Grissom is telling Paul Melander basically how jealous he is of him, that he gets to like work by himself, no one bothers him. And he does ask about the hand prosthetic again, and Paul Melander's letting him know he doesn't have a list of distributors. And this is funny enough, I also wrote down giving way too much info on strategy. Why are you telling Melander that you're gonna like how many days? Like he's like, oh well, I want the list because I want to look 10 days ahead, 10 days before and see the credit card statements and this and that. I'm like, don't give, obviously you don't think that he's the criminal, but don't give a civilian, like a random civilian, clues to how you plan to catch a killer here. There's too much info.
That whole like, oh, I'm a distributor and Grissom was only, or I'm a wholesaler and Grissom was only asking for distributor names. Like, dude, you know who you're selling these things to.
Yes.
You don't operating a shop and like taking individual payments, right?
Right.
So like you give him those, he goes to those people, he gets names from those, he goes to stores, he gets names from those people, right? Mm-hmm. That's the process. I mean, they would do it all in 30 minutes because it's the CSI effect.
Yes.
But that's how he would go, and he just like stonewalls them, and I was like, that's red flag number 2.
Yep. You're like,
And so I think that's actually the scene, the exchange that made me write it down.
Yeah.
Was the whole pushing back.
Oh, I don't know who I sold it to.
I tried to figure out if I thought Grissom was onto it, but then he like gives him more information. And I'm like, no, Grissom is still, he really doesn't have the slightest idea at this point.
No.
But he really should have.
Yeah.
I did, just to tell you something, I did skip this earlier, but at the very beginning of this episode, I also wrote down a prediction that is very wrong.
Oh, okay.
But I kind of forgot about it because obviously by the end of the episode, it's not true. But it was one of these things where like, I talked about, I bought lottery tickets the other day. Odds that I'm going to win are very, very small. Yes. But if I did, the payoff is very, very big.
Yeah.
So I wrote, long shot prediction. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Grissom is the serial killer. Doesn't remember killing these people. That was not true, unfortunately.
No, that's not what happened.
But I was like, I also kind of knew that wasn't true because as far as I know, they would have to wait many, many seasons. Cause
yes.
I think
he's on the show for a long time.
Yeah, I think like I've seen he's got hundreds of episodes on IMDb or something. Yeah. So it's like I know he's not going away this season.
No, he definitely is not.
I had to admit that sometimes I write down really crazy predictions too.
Hey, I'm for it.
Well,
We go to Warwick looking at shoe prints. He finds a match. Nick rubs it in his face that Jimmy was able to run the treads and that was done in 3 minutes, which again, CSI effect. I don't think their computers would have been powerful enough in 2000 for that to run in 3 minutes.
Could download an MP3 file in 3 minutes.
Yeah. So they identify the type of car, and lo and behold, Jim Brass lets them know that one was stolen last week. So maybe there's a lead on this case here. We then stay with Jim Brass, but he's talking to Grissom, and he's letting him know that Stewart's card was used at an ATM, was used at an ATM withdrawal post-death. Yep. And Grissom wants a whole machine, and Jim Brass barely pauses. He's just like, yeah, okay, I'll get you the entire, like, don't worry about it. I'm just gonna get the authorization to take this like machine that weighs thousands and thousands of pounds and transport it to you. Don't worry about it, man.
I mean, they can do that. Again, it isn't gonna happen today.
No.
Right? They probably have the crime. They could have the crime scene cornered off. They're gonna have to ask the bank. They're gonna have to find somebody who can move it. They're gonna have to find out where they're gonna put it. You know what I mean? Logistically, it's gonna be a thing.
Yeah.
And then really all they care about is the video at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's all they care about. So it seemed a lot, but again, it's for dramatic effect. We then go to Nick looking over the victim's clothing, and then we quickly move over to Sanders and Warwick being in the picture as well.
So importantly, he finds some blue dye on the crotch, the weirdest place.
Yes, it's like on his like belt, like near his like belt loop, sort of.
Yeah, like the top buckle on your fly. Is what it meant to me.
Okay, and so Sanders brings up the bet, and they try to like deny it, and then like catch themselves in a lie that they have a pot going regarding this case, and then we learn that the blue dust is pool cue chalk.
And we learn because they run it through the same machine.
Yes. Oh yes.
That they ran the DNA through.
Yes.
And oddly enough, I clocked this the first time. I was like, is that literally the same printout with the same graphs on it from the DNA scene. And so I tried to take screenshots, but apparently the Paramount Plus is smart enough not to let you take a screenshot. And blacks the screen.
I will show you. There is a way to shut that off.
Oh, well, I just used my camera and just took photos of my cell phone because you can't tell I'm using a cell phone, and those are the pictures I sent to you.
Okay.
But
we'll share the pictures on our social media, guys.
And then I rewatched them. It's one thing if they're just like, oh, have the printer spit out the same technical looking piece of paper, but I rewatched it like 3 times. It's the same shot.
It's the same shot because the gradient on the film, that's probably not the right word I'm thinking of, changes. Like it doesn't look like it's the same scene.
Yep, the light, like the color enhanced the lighting or something. Yes. I actually think the spinning machine part where the machine spins around is also the same scene, but they've cut it differently. So like in one of the scenes you can't see the whole thing.
Yep.
It's also weird because it could be refilming the same machine. Right, they use the same act. Like that's one of the things. Like Sanders' hand is like he grabs the paper both times. His hand's gonna look the same, right? He's gonna have the same lab coat on, the same watch on, the same.
Right.
He's gonna be the same hand, but like when you I was like watching to see like when the paper like folds and like all the lights flicker and stuff, and I was like, this is the same scene. I can't believe it. And it's like they must have just only had so much B-roll ready for the editors.
Yep. We then go to Nick and Warwick debating their theories. We see both of their reenactments played out, and this is where they admit to each other that they like each other's theories. That like each of their theories could work.
Yeah.
And
This is the scene I wrote. If Warwick, so this is where I decided that Warwick was wrong.
Okay.
Because if Warwick thinks some dude got it, like pushed the car down the cliff, like that's was in his reenactment flashback.
Where's the
they just fingerprinted the whole car.
I know. I thought the same thing. I was like, wouldn't it be on the underside of the car?
You think he put latex gloves on? Like they even show in the reenactment, his hands are just like on the bumper.
Yeah.
Because it's high up in the air because it's up on this berm. And I was like, then that would happen. And I was like, okay, well, plus they're like trying to lead you down the work path. So then I immediately want to jump down the Nick Stokes path.
Yep.
And so when we get to the resolution of the bet, I have a couple more comments, but I at this point I wrote down, I think the guy climbed into the back seat and then buckled up in the back seat.
Okay.
Because the Bentley thing was already kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they had already basically made that sound like it wasn't going to be a real thing.
Yeah, they skip over that one pretty quickly. Also, it comes in and it comes right back out again.
You have this whole ticking time bomb, right, as well, where there's a guy who they said 24 hours he'll wake up, and then he'll be able to tell you. They'll be able to tell you who's right and who's wrong.
Yep.
And so, obviously, they have to sort of figure it out before that happens.
Yeah. We then go back to what I would say is storyline A with Grissom, Sarah, and Catherine watching the ATM footage. It's of a fairly disheveled man flipping through pieces of paper, showing someone holding a dove, and either squeezing it too tightly so that it dies, or not holding it hard enough and it flies away. And Catherine, again, with very little background information, determines that the dove represents peace of mind, which actually represents justice, and that this means that he's going to keep doing these murders until he gets justice. And that was a lot of mental leaps to make with 10 flashcards.
That's some D&D party trying to figure out the plot. Level jumps there.
Yeah.
I
Guilty as charged.
I mean, I make some bold predictions for this podcast. But that's my job.
Yes.
Her job is to be a little bit more evidence-based.
Yeah.
As they often say, follow the evidence.
Yep.
And yeah, that was crazy. I will say that even though I had already kind of settled in on Paul Melander.
Yes.
As a potential suspect, there's a really, really good hint in this scene that it is Paul Melander that I picked up on the second watch through. They show all kinds of sketch art in the back of his warehouse when Grissom is visiting him.
Oh,
and it's matches the style, the look. Yeah, yep. It's all black line art on white paper, and it looks very similar. And so if you do go back and watch the episode again, key up on that. And it's in the background. I was the second time I was trying to stare at it to see if there were any Easter eggs or hints, and then we got to the ATM scene again, and I went, oh my god.
You're like,
They've already
Oh, there it
told
is.
you.
Yeah.
They're already telling us
Yep.
that he's the dude, and it's like, I think foreshadowing is one of the things this shows are really good at.
Yes.
They really put in some, and not just the things for the characters to pick up and find the story. I think for the viewers, there's a lot of great Easter eggs in these shows, and I always chalk that up to really good directing, because a lot of times that stuff isn't in the script, but something like this might have been in the script.
Right.
But it could have also been a director being like, oh, you know what I want to have in this scene? I want to have art that's going to match the style that's later on. The guys at the ATM. So like a keen-eyed viewer could pick up on it, right? And those like little things like make shows so much better.
Yeah.
I also think make them much more enjoyable to watch more than once.
I agree.
But
Because we watch, for those who maybe haven't listened to all our episodes, both of us watch the episode at least twice before we do this recording, so we generally kind of watch it through once just to have a regular watch through, and then the second watch through, especially myself, I take very detailed notes the second walk through so I can kind of guide our conversation.
I feel like
here.
our second, I feel it's kind of interesting because like your first watch through, a lot of times it's just like
Just watching it.
being reminded of the
Yes.
show that you've seen several times.
Yep.
For me, I'm like experiencing the first time, so I often just try to like jot down the major things and like all my thoughts, right? What are the things that pop into my head, the things that I would say out loud if I was watching it with somebody else.
Yep.
And then the second watch through, I put in like the little stuff, but it's the first time I'm seeing it a second time, so it's the first time I know what's coming. And then it frames a lot of context for me, allows me to pick up on a few of these things to hopefully add to the viewing experience, especially for people. I assume hopefully a good number of people who are watching this, they're big CSI fans. Like I think yourself, Lauren, and have watched the show more than once,
Yep.
right? And they're
Yep.
really interested in how other people perceive the show. But even if you're watching it for the first time and you're sort of following along with me, it might be fun to go back and watch the episode a second time, maybe after you watch this podcast, because I keep being like, oh, if you do go back and watch, I feel like this episode particularly, I keep going and saying, if you do go back and watch it, here's something I picked up on. So that could be a fun thing to discover.
Yeah, for sure. We go to Jim Brass and Grissom in the interrogation room with the quote-unquote bum, which I hate that phrase, but that's how they refer to him. And there's a very quick scene where they order him a steak because he doesn't really want to talk unless he has a full belly. We then go to Nick and Warwick back at the hospital again because Mr. Bangler has woken up. They both are immediately pushing their theories. They're not even giving this guy a chance to speak. They're just immediately like, "Oh, I'm sorry you got robbed. Oh, I can't believe that your friend got in this accident and then left you behind." And then we see the true reenactment from Mr. Bangler's perspective, in which he is schmammered at the pool hall.
Yep.
He then gets into his car, very drunk, and it swerves to avoid hitting a truck. He's teetering over the edge. Your prediction is correct. He climbs into the back seat, buckles himself in, and then tumbles over the side. And this was a nice, and I can't remember if this is around the time of this campaign. There was a big campaign of buckle up. And I wonder if this was around that time that there was a big push again on seatbelt save lives, because it was buckling up really saved your life, didn't it? And they were like, oh yes it did. And I was like, I wonder if this is around the time that laws were being passed that people had to buckle up, which for our younger audience, you used to not legally be required to buckle up. You could not buckle up, and that was not something you would be fined for. So I'm just remembering if this is when this was happening or not. I don't know.
We have click it or ticket in Massachusetts. It was around that time.
Yes.
But I think a lot of states were.
Yeah, we're doing that. So
Give me one
we
second.
realized that neither of them won.
I have a dog.
So they decided to push on the bet. No winner, no loser. So you weren't incorrect that Warwick's bet was not correct, because it was not correct, but neither was Nick's.
Yeah, I wrote Nick should have won. It was a DUI.
It was a DUI, but there was no phantom driver.
There was no
the
phantom driver.
Was the guy in the back seat.
They had a moment too where they were like, "What, do you climb the back seat and buckle himself in?" Well, it turns out that's supposition was exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
The only thing that bothered me was that if you were balancing on a fulcrum, right? If you think of a scale, anyone's ever had one? I mean, I say anyone. Depending on how old you are, you may never have experienced this. But doctors' offices used to notoriously have these scales with physical weights, and they would slide
One
them.
of my doctors still has this.
Yeah, and if you're perfectly balanced, and presumably the guy in the front seat is perfectly balanced, and you he's a big dude, you put all that weight in the back seat, that car is probably no longer falling over the front. Although, maybe, again, I have to give some credence to maybe the notion of going in the back causes a tip. It tips forward, wheels bounce, springs, cars have springs, all sorts of ways to transfer energy. But I was like, but I also know that I'm impressed by how quickly this guy was able to buckle a seatbelt. Because the back seat of old cars, it was the hardest thing ever to buckle those seatbelts in the back.
Yes, it was.
This
it was
guy,
100%.
I mean, it wouldn't be a story if he died.
He was able to make this happen.
Yeah, it would have been a good story if he died. So, we only that didn't get turned into an episode. That was one of the other cars over cliffs. One of a common. What was it? A 406, a common 406 in Las Vegas.
I think.
Yeah, there's a 406 and a 410 this episode. I don't remember which one.
Okay.
Which one is at the end of the episode and which one is this one? But yeah, it was a common thing. Car over cliff.
Yep.
And this one made the show because the guy was able to make the buckle.
Yep.
Just in time.
We go back to Jim Brass and Grissom with the quote-unquote bum, and he starts describing the man who paid him to go to the ATM and flip the cards in great detail. And as he's describing him, he has like these deep-set blue eyes, narrow jaw, black hair, and then when he says that his bad complexion, I do think that the first time I watched it, I think I was already getting that it was Paul Melander, but as soon as he said that he had a bad complexion, I was like, oh, it's the guy from the Spooky Warehouse. Yeah. It's like, and then
I like how the very beginning of the scene, it's like, oh, how tall was he? Was he this much taller? Like they're gonna get nothing out of this guy, and then he has
perfect detail.
Great distinctive recall of very iconic features.
Yes.
That really pinned down a person. Like you didn't want to lead with any of this.
Yep. And we end the scene with Grissom getting very upset that he let him go. He slams, he basically yells in the interrogation room that he let him go. And
Grissom compromises the case and he cuts off the star witness.
With the stutter.
With the stutter, I was like, oh, such a faux pas.
Don't feed him information. Let him say what he needs to say. Yeah. Don't feed him information. We then go to a hallway walk with Jim Brass, Grissom, Catherine, and Sarah. This is when we find out that Sarah is going to search for info on Paul Melander, while Grissom assembles a SWAT team, basically, to raid the warehouse.
I love this scene. This scene is there's so many layers to these scenes.
There's so many layers. And then we go to Grissom and Catherine en route to the warehouse with the SWAT team. Sarah's researching, she's on the headset, and this is when we learn that Paul Melander is killing men born on the same day that his father died because he thinks that his father's death, which was ruled as suicide, was a staged suicide, but his testimony was too shaky to indict the two hotel workers that he believes killed his father. So then we have
Paul Melander was there, right? So
yes. Yeah,
so
he's the boy's testimony. Paul Melander is the boy.
Paul Melander knows what happened, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
Although there was a split second where I was like, wait, with the two guys he killed, the two security guards, and I was like, no, because that would just be so statistically impossible for them to have those same birthdays.
Yeah, 1 year apart or 2 years apart. We have a little SWAT montage. We then realize that the warehouse is empty, which, with how quick the results came, he emptied this warehouse in 3 hours? How?
Yeah, just think about first off, he would have had to have a plan, right?
Yes.
So step one, have your moving company, your shadow moving company,
I'm just saying,
no one can track down.
I'm just saying, I just moved, and I hired professional movers for this move, and it took... The load up wasn't too bad, but it still took, and I definitely didn't have a warehouse full of props to move.
That Grissom was just in.
Grissom was
hours ago.
It took the professional movers at least 2 to 3 hours to move everything from my house into the truck, which was a lot less stuff than was in this warehouse.
So I get it. Okay, so let's just say you have this plan, right? Because you're expecting, you've left a lot of clues. You're expecting this to happen.
Yes.
Why? Are we not tracking down this moving company? No,
we're not. That's not an avenue that we're trying.
This guy's not an arch villain. He doesn't have a bunch of thugs who do this for him that you can't find.
He's a lone actor as far as we are aware.
Yeah, that was one of two loose ends that I have for this episode. The other one is they never come back to the DNA on the stamp, which presumably is Paul Melander's.
But
right?
I think we're supposed to go back and kind of.
But maybe it's not. Maybe it's Royce Harmon's. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? And The only thing that's left in the warehouse is an empty stool. On it is a note addressed to Grissom, but when they open it up, it's blank, and that Grissom interprets as meaning that they have nothing. So we have nothing. That's what he's saying.
Mr. Forensics. You're not going to try like a solvent that's going to show a hidden ink. You're not going to try a special light that reveals a character. You're just like, oh, it must be blank.
It's blank. It's blank because he's
you
leaving
crawled
us clues
around
and he means that
looking for broken toenails, you know?
Where's the broken toenails when you need them?
But you can't. But you're just like, oh no, that's just a blank piece of paper. There's no real.
It's nothing. Even though this guy. Yeah. We then go to Paul Melander at CSI headquarters. He's asking for Grissom. The woman at the front desk seems very confused. He just tells her to let Grissom know that a friend stopped by. He'll know, who he means. And then the final shot is him looking at the camera, kind of giving a little wave/nod to the camera, and then walking out of HQ. And then cut. End of episode.
I like to think the receptionist, after he's walking away, thinks like, Grissom has a friend? Good for him.
Good for him. Doesn't seem like the type to have a lot of friends.
Doesn't have any friends as far as anyone else knows.
All right, Nick, so what did you think about this episode, Anonymous?
We also skipped over the random nod to the name of this episode, I think.
We did. Sorry, I did not write that down.
Sarah
says it.
She says it when the DNA on the stamp comes back and they don't know who it is. She goes, anonymous. Right? Other than a handful of like complaints, in terms of like the gaps and stuff. The episode was good. I found the Warwick Nick storyline unfulfilling.
Yes.
Right. But I'm really happy to come back to this sort of teased out thing from the first episode, and which is why I was like hyper focused on looking for details and hints, and then kept picking up on all these weird things that made me think they must have had to reshoot stuff, re-edit stuff for
right.
What was probably comes down to we had one actor and then we lost that actor, and
so how do we
or like a writer in the writer's room said, but what if the killer is the Halloween guy? And they're like, and then we're like, you know what, I like that better than some other character we've never met.
Right.
And so then they're like, okay, we got to make that work, which means this other idea that we had 6 months ago when we wrote the pilot, or a year ago when we wrote and filmed this pilot, like, we got to move on from that, right?
Yeah.
And so to that extent, I like to give it a pass, but I'm particularly very happy that they're moving back in the direction. Very light outside the primary storyline in terms of like there aren't really personal things. There are things going on, like this is again feels like an episode that maybe was shot to stand by itself. Maybe they didn't know where it was going to fit in the schedule. Sometimes they shoot these episodes and this order. Could be number 7, this could be number 6. This really feels like it would have been a great episode to air before the last episode.
Yeah, I can see
for
that.
whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, but like I'm sitting here thinking like, what's going on with Catherine's daughter and the family character that just wasn't brought up once during this episode.
Not at all.
Or maybe this was supposed to be episode number 2, and that's why they had the Sega Dreamcast that they referred to in episode number 1.
Maybe.
Right, and then it didn't, and then it got bumped later in the schedule. They're like, well, let's just do some regular episodes before we, have any sort of continuation of plot. Make sure people are watching the show. And I was, so those were my various thoughts on sort of the structure of the episode. But overall, the episode was fine. I liked the episode. Not my favorite episode. There were a lot of things in this episode that made me happy, but there were also, I think, there are a few little crazier things. I think I mentioned this before we started recording, but I feel like this is the first episode where Brass feels a lot more buddy
Yes, he does.
with the team, right?
I think he's been trending this direction, is my take on it, that he's been trending towards the more friendly, but he's definitely overall, from beginning to end, a lot more friendly in this episode.
Which I want, because I don't...
You don't want that conflict just to have conflict.
Other than Grissom. He says Conroy Eckley, that's the name of the Conrad Eckley?
Conrad Eckley. Yeah.
When he shows him the life and death or good versus evil, he goes, it reminds me of my daytime supervisor.
Little quip from Grissom.
I was like, that's his nemesis. He doesn't need
Brass
to bring a foil of any kind. How about yourself?
Yeah, this is not my favorite episode. This is like middle of the road episode. I think because I really don't like the Nick and Warwick storyline.
Yeah.
In this one,
it was it was one of the weakest plots.
Yes, and I think, like you said,
in general.
it's unfulfilling. Like, you don't feel like, you're not like, oh, cool, that was like, yes, I get that they like threw, I guess, a curveball in the sense that like neither Nick or Rourke were correct, and that's supposed to be the big reveal, is that like neither of them got it right. But I just kind of was like, and then I don't know.
Even that fact would have been fine, right? So like by itself, the fact that nobody was right doesn't matter. I think how they got there and the evidence that was available to you as a viewer along the way is in like the way they tell the story is really where it matters. On paper, I think the idea of there's a Nick and Warwick storyline and they disagree how a crime was committed and they have a competition the whole episode to figure out. Whoever came like in the writer's room, that person, gold star. That's a great storyline.
Yes.
But what they wrote down and carried out just didn't live up to the promise of that storyline. And so that in a lot of ways makes it like even more like, oh well. You know, you missed you kind of missed the shot here. And it's like you can only do that so many times, and so like presumably, you know, unless it's a running gag, which it could become one, or a running storyline where they have prop bets on crimes that are constantly competing to see who fills it. I was kind of like, I was kind of disappointed that I didn't feel very invested in the story at any point.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's how I feel about it. The Royce Harmon one I liked a lot better. Like you, there were holes, or there was jumps. I shouldn't say holes. There's a few too many jumps for me to really be like, oh, A+ on that Royce, like on the Paul Melander story. But it's fine. It's a middle of the road episode. I'm okay with it. It's just definitely not my favorite. But next week we will be back with season 1, episode 9, Unfriendly Skies. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at Who Are You: a CSI podcast. We are also on Instagram, Twitter, and now Threads at Who Are You CSI Pod.
I joined Threads just because we were going to have a Threads account.
Yeah.
I resisted because you can't do it on your computer, and you have to do it
on the app. Yeah.
But it's also like trivially easy to do, which it's smart of them.
Yeah. So we are now on Threads. You can also send us an email. Who are you? CSIpod@gmail.com. But otherwise, we will be back next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.